And welcome back to the OHL podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Buckeye Boggs. That man over there is the Wild Man, Chris Wilds, and this is our Northwestern Wildcats 2024 season preview. To say Northwestern surprised me last year multiple times would be an understatement. If you recall, Chris, as we broke into fall camp in the middle of July, they had the Patty Fitz scandal. And we literally went into last season saying this team will be lucky to win one or two games. Boy, oh boy, were we wrong. We're not wrong often, Chris, but when we are way wrong.
This would have been the odd year, right, Eric?
Well, in Patty Fitt's world, it was
It was every other year.
right?
And I think that actually would have fell back into the pattern.
Well, it was after a couple bad years in a row, and so they had broke that pattern. Unfortunately, the wrong way for them. But in steps David Braun, a guy I had never heard of, and I thought there ain't no way on God's green earth that Northwestern is going to have a decent year. And not only did they have a decent year, Chris, they actually challenged for the Big Ten West division. That's how crazy things got in Evanston, Illinois last year. And so the only question at this point, Chris, is can he do it again?
I would like to say yes, but I just don't think so, Eric.
Well, we didn't think so last year either.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's take a look at this magical run that they had last year before we bring on our guest interview who covered Northwestern. So last year they started off with a loss to Rutgers, which didn't surprise anybody, 24-7. We didn't know Rutgers was going to have the season they had, but then things got interesting. A 38-7 win over UTEP, a 38-14 loss to Duke, and then a 37-34 win in overtime against Minnesota. Then they returned to who we thought they were, and a 41-13 loss to Penn State. But then they won 23-20 against Howard. If we stop right there, Chris, and they would have lost the rest of their games, they still would have done better than what you and I thought they were going to do. But then they lose
and Vegas would have been almost to what Vegas was,
right at where Vegas said they were, and that was before Patty Fitz left the team, mind you.
Yeah.
They lose 17-9 in Nebraska, and then they won 33-27 against Maryland. This was a Maryland team who had just lost to Ohio State after winning their first 5 games or something like that. And then Maryland drops them to Northwestern. And then Northwestern loses in a close one, 10-7 against Iowa, who was the eventual Big Ten West champions, at Wrigley Field. So that's where Ohio State will play them this year. And then look at how they finished the year. 24-10 win against Wisconsin. 23-15 win against Purdue. 45-43 win over Illinois against their rival. And then they went on the road in their bowl game against Utah and won 14-7. That was good enough for an 8-5 season, 5-4 in the Big Ten. Vegas said 3.5. Chris, we said take the under and felt good about it.
Yeah.
I lost money last year on Northwestern, ain't gonna lie. So David Braun, no, his record is not 5-7. My apologies. 8-5. And 8-5 to start off his coaching career at Northwestern. And then this year, they've moved to the Lakefront Stadium and to Wrigley Field. So when they're playing at Lakefront, it holds 12,000 people, Chris, somewhere around in there. 12 to 15,000.
So a high school stadium.
Pretty much. A big high school stadium, though. And there's that. Of course, we're going to get into that with the East Lot Pirates here in a second. West Lot Pirates. Is it West or East? I can't even remember now. But they're in one of the lots, anyways.
They're in a lot somewhere.
It's not big lots, but they're in one of the lots. And then that has an all-time record now of 556 wins, 702 losses, 44 ties. A bowl record of 7-10, so they upped that by 1. And they do have 8 conference championships, Chris. So there is that. Wow. What a magical season.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
that's something that I think, in all honesty, Chris, to be completely honest with you, no one, and I mean no one, saw that coming.
No.
And if I'm not mistaken, didn't David Braun win Coach of the Year last year in the Big Ten?
I believe so, but if he did, he definitely should have.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did.
There's
So,
I mean, there's no excuse for not giving that to him after the performance his team had last season.
yeah. All right, we're gonna bring on the Westlot Pirates. It is the Westlot Pirates. These guys are great, man. I enjoyed this interview. These guys are they are famous in the Northwestern area corner. They've had a podcast for many years. It's one of the longest running podcasts in the College Huddle network. They got started when they graduated college years ago and have kept up their show, their board and their podcast, and they do it better than what the media does it. I'm just going to be honest with you. These guys are legit, and it's a great interview. They are passionate about Northwestern. They love their Wildcats. You're going to love this interview, and you're going to learn more about Northwestern from these guys than you ever knew before. So hang tight. Chris and I'll be right back. And welcome back to the OHL podcast, everybody. As you can see, I'm joined by my guests. Sorry, I almost said co-host. We're not podcast. We're not on the same podcast yet, but we might be by the end of the show. I don't know. Erik and John from the Westlot Pirates. Thanks for coming on tonight, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having us, Erik. We're excited to be here.
Absolutely.
This is round 2 for us, getting into the College Huddle spaces outside of our own, and excited to dig in.
Beautiful. Now, before we jump into Northwestern, because there's actually a lot to cover here, tell everybody who the Westlot Pirates are, because you guys might be the most unique podcast out of all of them that I've interviewed, because you guys kind of started as like a college guys who were tailgating, right? And it just blossomed into what you guys have today all these years later. And in fact, you might be the longest running podcast in the College Huddle.
Yeah, it might be. I mean, it really is. It's the tailgate, which we used to always say like 50-yard line extended. Scuzz can point it out because Scuzz is sitting right in front of the picture. But if you draw a line straight out from the 50-yard line, we used to tailgate there, and that started. I mean, Scuzz and I are class of 2002. Sam is class of 2000. So we've been running that tailgate really since we got out of college, and I don't know, like, we've been running it for, at this point, maybe close to a decade. And then we've been kind of batting around loosely the idea of, hey, podcasts would be cool. And then at Scuzz's wedding, we all, over cigars at Scuzz's wedding, had our first formal discussion about it. And then it blossomed from there. We did kind of like a formal meeting at a bar that hasn't existed in a decade in Chicago. And then we finally were like, all right, let's go. And we figured it out. And then we did it. And yeah, it's been, going on like 14 years at this point. Now, we always say the first 5 or 6 was to crickets. But then finally we started to build a little traction in the community, and then it kind of built from there.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you guys a part of the College Huddle, and been big fans for actually a couple years. I've followed you guys the last couple years, and have enjoyed the content you guys put out, and so you do a phenomenal job. I do really highly recommend any Buckeye fans to check them out. Not just when Ohio State and Northwestern play each other, but check them out when they play other teams and things. They have great previews. I've been enjoying all the quick previews you guys have been putting out. It's really good stuff. And so this is just kind of on the flip side of that. We're doing a little bit long form of all the Big Ten teams here. And of course, Northwestern, outside of ourselves, Ohio State is the last one we're getting to here. So it's one of the most interesting things. So let's start here. Patty Fitz was a big fan. Some might say I had a man crush on him for what he was able to accomplish at Northwestern and what he did. And then the whole thing happened last year. Where is the fan base at in their mindset and headset and head with him and with what's going on now? Granted, what happened last year did a lot to make that okay. It feels like
This is probably a bit of a sore spot for the Northwestern community. I don't know that you can peg where everybody's at. I think people are on a lot of different wavelengths. Mileage may vary, if you will, but I think what was so amazing and important and critical about last year was it gave us all something to gravitate towards. And instead of chewing each other up, which we had been doing for months leading up to that season, I mean, how can you not pull for David Braun and this team? And that it was such a, I don't know, a galvanizing year, a unifying year. And I think you would be hard pressed to find a Northwestern fan that's not excited about the potential of this season. And that's not saying that we're going to be some awesome, amazing team that's going to vie for the conference or anything like that. That's not in the cards. But the idea that we have a young, smart head coach who gets it, players that have bought in and have an opportunity to build on a successful year for the second season in a row, which, by the way, hasn't happened since 2017 to 18. We haven't had two good seasons in a row since then. Everyone is quite optimistic and quite excited.
Yeah. Let's piggyback off that, John, and talk about Braum a little bit. It caught me off guard last year. I'm just gonna be dead honest with you. Like
us too.
Yep.
did not see that coming. Who is this guy? Like, is he like some kind of superhero coach? Like, I know he comes from, what was it, North Dakota, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, one of the Dakota schools, and was kind of just thrust into the situation, and then all of a sudden it was like, dude can coach.
Yeah, he is from North Dakota State, which of course is in its own way kind of a little bit of a cradle of coaches. You have Chris Kleiman from Kansas State is out of there. Matt Entz won multiple titles and now bizarrely is linebackers coach under D'Anton Lynn at USC. But they've churned out a lot of excellence. But interestingly with Braun, he was actually only at NDSU a couple of years. And I think we ran through Winona State, Northern Iowa, North Dakota State, but like a rocket ship of a guy, like up and up, like where he goes to a stop and people are like, wow, that guy really knows what he's doing. And I think he's really rapidly ascendant. I think for everything, and we've talked about this in a couple of different places, but I think if you look at Pat Fitzgerald and you say, okay, if we're just talking about like the football piece of it, what were his strengths? Well, his strength was program building, connection to the university, connection to the community, fit with the place, and ability to get other kids to buy into that and to get families to buy into that. In terms of the X's and O's football piece, there was definitely a feeling within the Northwestern football community, and this goes even to people who have really supported him through the other stuff, but for a football piece, that the program had gotten stale in a couple of ways, and inflexible and kind of rigid in its ways of thinking. And those were things that were happening at multiple levels, not just from an X's and O's standpoint, but from a personnel standpoint, the way personnel was used. So suddenly David Braun comes in. He's the DC and becomes the interim head coach. But we also have, for example, we highlight a guy from South Dakota State, Christian Smith, who came in to coach our defensive line. And suddenly you have a bunch of young guys, ascendant guys coming from the FCS who are basically like down to down, play to play. We are changing personnel. We're changing scheme. We're going to do everything we can on a down to down basis to shuffle personnel, get the right guys on the field, and then use them. So there were places like, if you look at the way we talked about our defensive line going into last season, like I was talking about it basically like, boy, I sure hope a couple of the true freshmen we have coming in can pan out because we just seem to be grasping at straws there. And then suddenly Braun comes in, the new D-line coach comes in, the whole approach, the way guys are used, the way guys are deployed, the rotations, everything changes. It's like every one of those guys gets a set of wind. They're filled with belief and strength. A ton of guys take these big individual leaps that is as much due to their own effort as anything. But suddenly it's like, it wasn't so much that we had this influx of new guys. It was that suddenly approaches were changed. There was more flexibility, things like that. And then certainly on the defensive side of the ball, you suddenly had that. So I think that's one of the things he has. He's a thinker. He's a great mind. He's a great motivator. But he's someone who has the energy to really attack things with a level of flexibility and a level of down-to-down variety that we've needed. We needed that to mix things up, and we're really benefiting from it.
I think it's important to call out like how excited we were for him just to come in as a defensive coordinator. He's the first time that Fitz had really gone outside of the Northwestern tree, if you will, to hire somebody. Previously, he had gone to this dude named Jim O'Neill that was a total catastrophic failure, and a guy that he knew back in the day that had connections. I think he was he a grad assistant at Northwestern? I can't remember what his connection or tie was, but this Braun represented diving into a brand new pool of coaches and actually bringing in some outside voices to add some diversity to the conversation, some different experiences to the conversation. We were ecstatic about it, even just for him to be a defensive coordinator at Northwestern, and felt that could be a pretty big impact. And then to see his influence, not just on the defensive side of the ball, but we see it on special teams. We see it on offense, where we hope to really see it this year. But he's changed the way of thinking and the way of operating across the entire spectrum of the program on the football side.
So it sounds like there was a lot of buy-in to what the coaches were trying to do from the players, and that buy-in translated in some wins that was a snowball effect in a lot of ways. The momentum just kind of, which when you have to build your own momentum, which is exactly what he had to do. He had to build his own momentum. To do that, it was kind of like watching, in my opinion, and I've always had this soft place in my heart with Northwestern, because I'll never forget the first time I got to go to Indy to the Big Ten championship game was against Northwestern, and I'm surrounded by Northwestern people. I'm not sure how that happened, but it happened, and they all were like the nicest people like ever. And as the game unfolds, like I'm like super nervous because things aren't going so well. And the guy goes, "Don't worry, you're gonna win." But I can't believe we're actually in this game. Like he put his arm around me and trying to console me as a Northwestern fan. I'm like, man, these guys are really nice,
Yeah.
But anyways, so I've had this soft spot in my heart, and of course, like I said, I had a man crush on Patty Fitz because I just thought what a perfect hire he was. I was like, there's nobody that could do for Northwestern what he was doing, and then Rom does it, and it's like, okay, there's something more here. I don't know if there's one single thing you can put your finger on, but it just felt like to me that there was this unbelievable belief in what he was preaching, and there was complete buy-in.
Yeah, and I think one important thing to say with that too is Braun has done like an unbelievable job, and so have the coaches. You can't undersell the players and what they did, because I mean you kind of have to factor it through to so many of those players. So many of them to this day are just Fitz loyalists through and through.
Sure.
And not only that, but everything that's happened in the Northwestern community, everything that was going on, and they all made a choice to carry that, but to completely buy in to a new coach. And in a lot of ways, like a new approach, like in X's and O's and different things that were going on, and really kind of forge that belief. Like, I think like those guys chose to really buy in. And I mean, like we've spoken to a lot of the families of a lot of these players. And I mean, like, again, not to get deep into the weeds of everything that happened, but one of the many incontrovertible facts is that those families were all completely put through the ringer. It was just horrible for all of those families and for all of those kids to have to go through. And in the midst of that, they made a buy-in to the program. And really, like, again, like it was Braun. And again, he's a magnetic guy. He's an awesome guy. Like, I've spoken to him. He's just awesome, huge heart of a guy. But it took the players really buying in too. And then I think like that's something where it, like, when we look towards this coming season and we're thinking about X factors and things like that, like those guys absolutely went through it and then went through and battled out a lot of games that could have gone either way. So, I mean, like it was like Braun, huge deal, but I mean, the players truly did come together and buy in.
There's one group of players that's worth calling out, and that is, when I previewed the offense going into last season, we still had Mike Pajakian hanging on as the offensive coordinator. Felt like a real lame duck OC, a guy that by all objective measures probably should not have been retained. But and so there's a lot of consternation in the fan base. Like what are we going to be in offense? We've been garbage for the last couple seasons. Unless we keep rolling out transfer QBs, and we're batting 500 right now, right? We've had 2 that worked and 2 that didn't, and there was a lot of expectation. We're just going to see the same old on offense in 2023. But we were bringing in 3 critical players: Ben Bryant, quarterback transferring in from Cincinnati; AJ Henning coming from Michigan; and Cam Johnson coming from Vanderbilt. Sorry, I had a moment.
Arizona State by way of Vanderbilt.
Yeah, Arizona State by way of Vanderbilt. But those 3 guys, and what I said is like, look, if our offense emerges this year, it's going to be because Bryant, Johnson, and Henning basically came in and took this group to a new level through their leadership and their play. And that's exactly what we saw play out on the field. And there's a bunch of other guys that emerged as a group, but that story of leaders on the field and galvanizing the Northwestern team in a critical way is that aligns with every. You point to a season where Northwestern has had success, whether it's going back to '95, and the team basically just deciding we're done losing, we're going to be good now. Steve Schnurr is the quarterback, and the leadership he showed in that season. Darnell Autry as well. Like this story perpetuates itself every time there's a good Northwestern team, and that was a critical aspect of last year's squad. You had some really critical senior leaders showing up and not just supporting the coaches and buying in, but taking the mantle and taking charge.
One more storyline I would like to cover with you guys before we talk roster. The new stadium that's being built, obviously sets up for a interesting home field for you guys. I still have, there you go. I still have nightmares of the Win game from a couple years ago, where literally we couldn't. CJ Stroud, who broke NFL rookie records, couldn't throw the football. It was so bad. And and so now it's like, we're just going to make it worse for everybody. We're just going to put it right on the lake, open it all up. I mean, oh my gosh. And then we're going to play in Wrigley Field for the big games too, later in the season. Of course, so Ohio State fans, for some reason, I don't know why. Maybe you can tell me why I'm right or wrong, are excited to go to Chicago, to Wrigley Field, to watch this game. I'm like, I don't think that's as good a venue as you guys think it is to watch a football game. Maybe I'm wrong. But the home field situation for you guys, again, most head coaches would not have to deal with this in year number 2. Here you go. You get to split your home games between 2 locations, my friend. How's he dealing with this? How does the fan base look at this situation?
I'm going to let John cook here, because he's got some really good, a really good talk track. But Braun advocated for this.
Really?
Braun put money in to support this because of how important and impactful he thought it could be for the team.
Yeah. So, I mean, like he has totally bought in. Yeah. Braun is 100% behind this. I think it's really funny for us to come on an Ohio State podcast and have to explain. We were joking before we got on the air here, right? That they're in a major conference, you're not going to find 2 different teams than Ohio State and Northwestern in terms of like the layout. And I know that there are a lot of Ohio State fans who it's difficult to, like, you can't wrap your head around how a 15,000 seat stadium could possibly work. And it's because, like, we exist in these 2 totally different planes where, I mean, nominally the seating capacity of the old Ryan Field was like 49.5. But we're like rarely filling that. The renovated Ryan Field that's going to be opening in 2 years has significantly reduced capacity, which is fantastic for us. It's a much better fit for the university and the community, et cetera. And it's less for us to deal with all the visiting fans who are coming in, right? So as a point of reference, you are indeed right that many Ohio State fans are psyched up about the chance to go to a game in Wrigley Field. That's our homecoming. And it is not the homecoming environment Northwestern fans are looking for. Is a bunch of Buckeye fans descending on Wrigley. So like you have to frame this lake stadium through a couple of different lenses. That's one. Like I can't tell you how much it warms our cockles that Wisconsin has to come play in that 15,000 seat stadium and they can't bring anybody to the game. It's
Jump
awesome.
around, baby.
Yeah, it's like that's so, and plus because also at really, and we were talking about this with Zach Guggenheim, but like the real nadir for us prior to this idea gaining traction was when they floated the idea of playing a quote unquote Northwestern home game in Lambeau Field against Wisconsin. Which to say that was received negatively by Northwestern Nation. So I do love that we sort of dangled that carrot in front of the Badger fans.
I hadn't thought about this before.
And now they just don't get to come to the game. But you can look at that, and like the other piece of it too, though, is it's if this wouldn't have come together, what we were looking at. Because Northwestern was always going to hold like a spot aside for an Ohio State. Like you guys were always going to get Wrigley or Soldier 100%. Illinois was probably always going to get Wrigley or Soldier, like our rival, right, etc. But so many of the rest of these games, we're looking at trying to piece together SeatGeek Stadium, which is southwest suburbs, right? That's nowhere near campus. It's not even remotely close. Wrigley's not available until the end of the season.
Right.
And Soldier, that like the Bears weren't about to release, like the NFL is not releasing that NFL schedule early so that Northwestern can plan out what game, like none of that was going to happen. So like realistically, suddenly you look at your options and you realize they're way, way smaller than you think. And that realistically, we were probably looking at like 75% of our season to crickets, with like 5,000 to 10,000 people down at SeatGeek Stadium with none of the students going to the game or anything. And from that, we pulled this, frankly, miracle scenario out where like every student just has to roll out of bed and walk over to the stadium, right?
Right.
We're dealing with something that every Ohio State fan has dealt with since the dawn of time, and Northwestern's never dealt with ever, which is scarcity. It's a hot ticket and there aren't quite enough spots to go around sometimes. So like you have people reaching out to you being like, hey, you got any extra tickets? Because like I'm having trouble getting a ticket. You got any spare tickets? Which is something no Northwestern fans ever heard ever. So it's like it's totally different. It's totally apples and oranges between Ohio State and Northwestern, but for us, this works, and we're stoked about it.
That's a great insight and great take. And I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to Wrigley. No way, shape, or form. We're doing our watch party with a bunch of podcasts that game. Because I have PTSD driving through Chicago, man. I'm like, I ain't going, man. No way. But I can't wait to watch games in that small little stadium on the lake. I think it's gonna be cool as heck to see that, right on the lake like that. And I've seen pictures that's been posted. It looks kind of fun, man. It looks like, like it's gonna be a pretty big home advantage for you guys. I really do believe that.
That's what we're so excited about, because we've never had that. I mean, Ryan Field, beautiful place that I have on my wall, was this beloved stadium and historical place for Northwestern, the site of a handful of really incredible experiences and seasons that so much of the fan base has visceral firsthand experience with, right? But it was never an intimidating place to play. It was never loud. It was never overwhelming. And in the moments where it could have been those things, Northwestern fans were generally outnumbered. I don't think either of us ever went to a game against the Buckeyes that wasn't at least 60% red in the stadium, and if not more, right, depending on the relative strengths of the two teams in a given year. And so, like, even when you look at like the new Ryan Field that they're building in that location, they're decreasing the capacity from 47K down to 35, and it's intentional to give Northwestern more of that home field advantage in big games, and that's just going to be amplified on the lake. I looked this up as you guys were talking earlier. So the size of the student section at the Horseshoe is 29,000 students.
It's so hilarious.
Northwestern only has 8,000 students on campus. So, like, and I think our student section at Ryan Field was 3,000, maybe 3,500. So, like, this smaller stadium, like, proportionally, it makes a lot of sense. But we have this, and hopefully it plays out this way, right? But we have this sense that it's going to be a 90% partisan crowd, something that Northwestern football fans have rarely experienced, if ever. Yes, the logistics are going to be a hassle. Yes, the prices are quite high relative to what NU fans have paid in the past. But it's going to be truly unique, and we think it's going to afford a home field advantage for these 2 years. Which, John painting the picture of what was literally the worst case scenario of being in Bridgeview on the southwest side. And I mean, like, at one point I was personally Googling, like, what does Loyola's football stadium look like, high schools on the north side of the city, if there was anything better. So this is, I think, for a lot of fans, this is best case scenario. Now we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, the views that you mentioned, Eric, I have friends not affiliated with Northwestern calling me up and saying, dude, you guys are going to regret not building your real stadium there. That's an incredible spot to watch football.
Yeah, I think there's one other piece of it too, which goes back to something that we were talking about earlier. I use like an example. Here's like, just to give you one example. The guy who started, I think, just about almost every game for us last season at right tackle, Josh Thompson. We've gotten to talk with his family a little bit, and this is just an example amongst various families who we've gotten to know. But this is a guy who, if you look at his age and how his career is going to play out, he's one of like the young, really up and coming guys on this team. Right tackle, he's probably going to play the right tackle, the right guard for us this season. But that's a guy who's he has 2 years of eligibility left, and those two years of eligibility are right. It's like this coming year and the year after that. I.e., this is a guy who's been through so much, like all of these guys have, right? And did so much to contribute to this magical season last season. And he's never going to see the new building, right? He's never going to play in the new building. His career is not going to take him up to that point where this thing he helped contribute to and helped build. So then you're like, you feel like you want something more for these guys, right? That are not going to taste that new building at any point. You want something more for them than going down and playing at SeatGeek Stadium to crickets for 2 years, right? And now instead of that, they get to have this special thing where those guys will be like, they'll always be able to say, I was part of that group of guys that got to play on that Lake Stadium. There were only 2 magical years that it was there, but that was my thing. And I don't know, like I think Northwestern fans, we just feel good for those guys and their families that they get to have that.
That's cool. That's really cool. All right, let's move on now to roster real quick here, and I'll ask one of you to take offense and the other one of you to take defense. And I just want you to kind of say big losses and who we replace them with roster wise. I'll let you guys decide which you want to take.
I'll go first because that's the way we usually do it. And then I know everyone just wants to know about quarterbacks, so that we can put a pin in that for a second. On my side of the ball, I mean, if we're talking losses, I mean, I give a couple of different ones. I mean, obviously Bryce Gallagher, like just a tackling machine at middle linebacker for us for years, and younger brother of Blake Gallagher. It's like this will be the first time in forever that we haven't had a Gallagher brother doing really good work for us in the linebacker core, going all the way back to both 18 and 20. 2 teams that I know you're very familiar with in the Big Ten championship game. That takes us all the way back to the Blake Gallagher years. But so we won't have him in the middle. Rod Hurd is another guy. We thought Rod Hurd would be going on to the NFL. He's going to be at Notre Dame for 1 year, but that was a guy who played nominally safety, but really kind of like a nickelback, quasi third linebacker, quasi 4-2-5 rover kind of role, and played really all over the place. Those are really big players. And then a really kind of classic unsung hero kind of guy, PJ Spencer, in the interior of the defensive line, is a guy who's going to be gone also. So those are some really notable pieces. And I think a lot of people would especially point to Bryce Gallagher in the middle. Who have we got coming back? We believe you got a guy named JT and a couple of his friends, and the JT on that defensive line in Columbus can claim to be the best defensive player in the Big Ten. That's what we believe. We think our guy Xander Mueller is number 2. We think he is that good. We think that him being third team All Big Ten last year was a crime. This is a guy who Scuzz has pointed out is in the top 7 or better in every single statistical category you can imagine, be it like passes defensed, interceptions, forced fumbles, TFLs, sacks, tackles, solo tackles. He does everything. And not only that, he does those things for us in the absolute biggest moments. Game-saving tackle versus Minnesota. Game-winning interception versus Purdue. For us, you can't do linebacker better than him. And we're putting him behind a defensive line that is basically, in terms of experience, about 12 deep. They are not the kind of linemen, you guys, it's not a load of guys who are going to go in the top half of the NFL draft, but it's a deep group. They've all played a lot, and they were all forged kind of through the fire of last season. So that's the starting place. I mean, I could go into other guys, but I think for us, if you're looking for the single core thing, it's that we think we have the best linebacker in the Big Ten, and we think he's operating behind a deep, experienced defensive line.
A line that produced last year, too. I think that's the other piece, right? Mm-hmm. So on the offensive side, let's save quarterback, because I think that's tied and tethered to the change in offensive scheme this year in a really important way. But Ben Bryant is probably our biggest loss from last year. Dude came in from Cincinnati, was a great leader at the quarterback position, a better passing QB than we've seen since probably Clayton Thorson when he graduated in 2018. So it's been a long time since we've had a guy at the helm like Bryant. Dude took a beating. Northwestern gave up 51 sacks last season. Yeah, yeah, rough. But 8 wins, beating Utah in a bowl game. It was a Herculean effort, right? The other 2 big names that we've lost. Well, so 3 big names. The other 3 big names we've lost on offense. So in addition to Bryant, Brendan Sullivan was the backup QB. He left for Iowa. Sullivan notably played extremely well against Maryland when Ben Bryant was out hurt, and beat Maryland last season. So
he was also the quarterback of that Northwestern game you mentioned that you're trying to repress from your memory. In the bad weather game that consumed C.J. Stroud, he was Northwestern's quarterback in that game.
Mm-hmm. So we're pretty much starting over at QB. The other 2 big names. So Josh Preeb was an excellent run blocking guard for us last year. He's transferred to Michigan. He's probably going to be a Michigan starting unit on offensive line. And then Cam Johnson, who I mentioned earlier, he was our leading receiver last year. He's graduated. I believe he's in NFL camps, etc. But the critical guys we bring back are the rest of the skill players. So AJ Henning, who transferred from Michigan last season, was our number 2 receiver. Just an injection of pure speed for this team. I think the fact that he decided to stay last season with everything that went down over the summer, the fact that he and Bryant and Johnson stayed true to their commitments, played through the season with Northwestern, played excellently, and then AJ decided to stay another year, speaks volumes to the character of the locker room. And just that, it's got to be that dude would have had so many opportunities if he wanted to move on again. So that's just like a really exciting bellwether for me. But Thomas Gordon comes back at tight end. Marshall Lane comes back at tight end. We bring back our entire running back room, which includes Cam Porter, a dude that gave you guys fits back in that 2020 Big Ten championship game. Joseph Hyman is a speedster youngster. This dude played a little bit last year. There's this incredible clip of him just undressing a dude during the bowl game on a long run. And then another guy, Komalafe, who is another really, really fast running back. I believe that this Northwestern team hasn't had this much speed in about 2 decades. And I think where that really comes to bear is when you look at Zach Lujan, who we're bringing in as the new offensive coordinator. That's the biggest add to this team this year, in my opinion. Similar to Braun, coming from the FCS, young, up-and-coming head coach. When I hear Nate Tice on the Athletic Football Show talk about, like, this is the college coach he's most excited to be watching him run offenses in college the next year, and that's my offensive coordinator, I'm salivating at the prospect of what could happen. And I'm not suggesting Northwestern is going to score 40 points a game, because the offensive line is a work in progress. There's a lot of pieces there, but we got to figure out how they fit together. And then we're starting over brand new at QB. We're bringing in Mike Wright from Mississippi State, or from Vanderbilt via Mississippi State, however you want to say it. And then we've got another really fast dual threat guy on the roster named Jack Lausch, who's entering his sophomore year. Those two guys plus all that speed, I think, portends a multifaceted, deceptive running attack that is very much fits the type of offense that Lujan has run before at South Dakota State. And how much better, it really remains to be seen, but the idea that this offense can improve incrementally from last year is pretty plausible. So that's what's got us pretty juiced on the offensive side this season.
All right, now that we've talked roster and we've talked coaching staff, and we have that, I'm going to start with you on this one, Erik, and then John, you can jump in when Erik's finished. I'm asking you to take off your purple Wildcat glasses here, at least for half of this answer. What is the strength, and then what is the weakness of this football team in your mind?
Our strongest unit on offense is our running back room. Porter is a senior guy. Hyman and Komalafe as speedsters that go alongside of him. This is the identity that this team wants to have, is a team that can run the ball. We feel we have strong, proven guys in that space with a multitude of talents, et cetera. And the weakness is O-line. I mentioned it, we gave up 51 sacks last year. We're bringing back a lot of the same guys. We've got a pretty enticing transfer coming from USC and Cooper Lovelace, who we think we can slot in at one of the tackle positions. But this is, in addition to Preeb, who we lost to Michigan, we lost another guy to graduation. We don't have a lot of proven guys on the line. It's probably going to be one returning starter in left tackle Caleb Tiernan, and then 4 guys that certainly made like a start or two last year, or played a little bit last year, or in Lovelace's case are high pedigree guys. But there's zero continuity on this line. There's zero combined starts that they've spent working together. That connectivity and that experience of playing together, which is so critical in offensive line play, is we're starting from virtually zero at the beginning of the season. That's the biggest hole on this team.
I think for my part, like if we're looking, I mean, real talk, I think corner is an area that, to say the least, other teams are really going to test. We've got a couple of guys there, Theron Johnson, Ore Adai, and then some players that that we're excited about, but have virtually no starting experience. I mean, well, literally no legit starting experience behind them. So it's a green unit. It's a unit that, I mean, we're losing like Garnett Hollis Jr. off that unit, who was a really good corner, was definitely our number one corner last year. And like, for example, like Illinois last game of the regular season, like Illinois' wide receivers really went off against us, and that was like a rough time. And I think if you look at our safety core, there's a lot of talent in there. Coco Asma is a guy who's been around forever. Devin Turner is a really exciting player. Like, we feel really good about both of those guys starting. I would say in both of their cases, the run is their biggest strength. So I think you can look at the secondary and be like, teams are definitely going to take their shots at us and try to hit us through the air. Like, there's no doubt about it. And that's like, if we have a weakness on defense, that's what I would point to. Now, we're also replacing a couple of linebackers. There are some really exciting players there who I think are going to get a chance to play. And again, scheme really helps us out. I think a lot of people would look at the problems that this team had on run defense last season and overlook the fact that so much of that was front loaded at the very beginning of the season. And we all know what this team was dealing with at the start of this season. As this season went on and certain magical games happened, the UTEP game, but then especially the Minnesota game, and this team built belief and realized that all the new things that were brought in that were working. Really, the run defense really improved as all of these defensive linemen grew and like realized that they were getting that oxygen and that they had the ability to really build a unit there. And when that happened, the run defense as a whole got much, much better. So I think a lot of people would look and say like, hey, what about the run defense? Honestly, that's not what I'd say from a defensive perspective, most Northwestern fans are worried that those corners are going to get picked on. And we're hoping that they take a leap up. And we think that they have the potential to do that. In terms of strength, I mean, it goes back to scheme. But I would look and I would say you can look at where we finished up last season in the Las Vegas Bowl and the way that our defensive line absolutely ground Utah's offensive line to powder in that game. And I think a lot of people would jump from that to say, yeah, but that was like a bowl game and like a bunch of those guys like sat out or transferred out and everything. And like Utah had like a patchwork line that didn't have like, for all the things Scuzz just said about our line, like it was guys who didn't have experience together. But you can look at our schedule and we are stacked with teams early in the season that we are playing that have totally reworked offensive lines. Yeah. And like, if we're looking at a strength on the defensive side of the ball, all literally like almost our entire 3-deep defensive line are returning players with tons of experience and well-defined roles. And we think that's going to be a big defensive strength for us.
All right, let's take a look at the schedule here real fast. And I've got it pulled open, and you start off with Miami, and I'm not talking about the U. I'm talking Miami of Ohio. So you got the Redhawks.
It's a toss-up which we would rather play. Let me put it that way. I don't know that playing Miami of Florida would be any better.
Miami of Ohio owns the lifetime record in that series.
Are you serious?
They own it in every way. They have the most recent win 2 years ago, and they're 7-3 in the series. They have the longest streak in the series and everything.
I had no idea.
In 1995, the week after we upset Notre Dame and changed the entire course of Northwestern athletics and the university to a certain degree, we lost to Miami of Ohio inexplicably.
I don't even remember that.
The year before Randy Walker became the head coach at Northwestern, he beat Gary Barnett at Miami of Ohio. And then I believe the first time he played his former team, we also lost to them. It's this weird bugaboo that we've had with Miami of Ohio for quite a while.
Let's just mark this up as Brom's going to get the Red Hawk off your back because that's going to happen.
We hope they're the best team in the MAC. Like, it's a huge game for us.
Then you get Duke at home as well, and what's oddly become kind of like this non-conference rivalry you guys have with them out of the blue.
We know them very well.
Yeah. Of course, they've got a new coach themselves.
They're a total reset across the board.
Rebuild. It's a gut rebuild. There's nothing that team has that the previous year had.
So what I hear you saying is you're a little bit more concerned about Miami of Ohio than you are Duke.
Correct.
Okay. All right. This is why we have you guys on here. Eastern Illinois, that should be a dub. And then your first road game, you guys get to welcome Washington to the Big Ten by going out to Seattle. And so you'll be playing on the water, so you should be right at home. And going up against another team who has purple now. Super interested in this game.
Eric, what would you peg? What do you think the line for this game is going to be? Let's say these teams do what's expected of them the first 3 weeks of the season. Like, what do you like? What do you think the line's going to be?
Washington by 6.5.
That's about
Yeah.
what we would say. I think Washington by a touchdown, and we can't tell you enough how much we love that.
We think it's a
That is
toss-up.
exactly where Northwestern fans want to be. This is the space that we love. That is a team that turns over literally their entire offense and their 4 best defensive players and their entire coaching staff, and we're going to be 7-point dogs to them. Love it. Give us that every single day of the week. That's where every Northwestern fan wants to live.
If this is in Evanston, it's probably more of a pick 'em.
Maybe.
Yeah, or maybe Washington by 3. I don't know.
But we're very used to losing the laundry battle of public opinion and getting pissed off about it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is where we live. Every Northwestern fan is going to be so fired up for that game.
So I think your assessment, Eric, is a really accurate assessment what the line should be. I think in reality it's going to be 8.5 or 9 because of laundry. And that's maybe after the public weighs in, right, and moves it a little bit from the open. But that's it. It just when you deconstruct that team on paper, it's unlike a Michigan that is turning over their entire offense or a large portion of their offense as well, right? The continuity and the identity to everything that Washington has ever been, it's all gone. Like they have, there's nothing that they can link and tie back to where they've been the last 3 years, and that's a stunning thing to think about with kind of a 3-headed NFL coach monster coming in to try and sort out college football. I know Jed Fish is established with what he did at Arizona, but I think there's just way too much like, oh, Jed Fish is going to Washington, we'll just plug and play what he did at Arizona, that'll be fine. I don't know.
Okay, interesting. Bye week, and then you get Indiana. Please stomp them. I can't stand their new head coach. By the way, this is interesting. You feel free to take this. Go look up how many transfers Indiana has and where they come from. We are going to find out this year if a group of 5 all-star team can compete in a Power 4 conference.
Absolutely. We're so we think it was an awesome hire. We think that mainlining the JMU coaching staff, that's the way it should be. Those guys were dominant, and they were dominant on the defensive side of the ball where Indiana needs a lot of help. And they're paying, it's hilarious. The DC at Indiana is making $1.1 million a year to be the DC at Indiana. So, I mean, you can't say they're not trying. But yeah, we talked about they basically mainlined JMU defensive players. And it's they were an awesome Sun Belt defense. But yeah, they got a lot of Sun Belt guys on that team now. So
and it's not just JMU. They pulled in some from other areas, a group of 5.
Yeah.
And Signetti comes in and literally Google me, really? Yeah. Goes to the basketball game, announces himself, and says Purdue sucks. And oh, by the way, so does Ohio State and Michigan. And we're all like, do you realize that Ohio State has a 28-game consecutive win streak against you?
Yeah,
you don't need to poke the bear like that. That's unnecessary.
Yeah. I mean, it's all fascinating. I mean, we really like that game for us this season. We just think where there's a really good chance he's going to build them up, but they don't have the pieces to do it right now. And again, I think we get that one on the lake too. That's one, we like that one for us this year for sure.
Good deal. Moving on, you're at Maryland, and what I believe, hear me out, I believe Maryland is going to really drop this year. I do not think that they realized.
We were wondering where you were going to go because I was like, yep.
I do not think the Terrapin fan base realizes how much Talia Tagovailoa meant to that program offensively. He covered up a lot of warts,
especially on their offensive line, which
absolutely.
I mean, they only had one returning starter last year,
5
and they're
new offensive linemen for them.
Yep, they're in worse spot this year. There's this. I said it when we previewed Maryland. There's this really funny comment from Phil Steele in his magazine this year where he talks about they only have one returning guy, but Mike Loxley's a lot less worried than I am. I don't know. It just
I think
feels like Mike Loxley's like, oh, we did it last year. But yeah, without Talia, I think it's going to be a much harder task.
Yeah.
I think we had an extended discussion when we previewed Maryland about. I mean, I think it because of the audience of this podcast, I don't have to tell anyone who the only Big Ten coach with higher first coach fired odds than Mike Loxley is, and it's because of the Ryan Day is just drowning under the expectations of your fan base all the time. But the larger point being, Loxley's number 2 on that list, and we had this whole extended discussion about like why that is, right? Because I mean, it's not like they were pretty good last year, but you can look at their schedule and you can look at the fact that they're losing, right, like maybe the most transcendent player they've ever had at that university. And you can look and you can be like, there's definitely a situation where they drop like their last 7 or 8 games. And then on a week-to-week basis, this thing is just spiraling out of control.
Yeah,
and I remember Sam, like on the pod, was bringing up being like, look, it's Maryland. It's not Ohio State. The expectations aren't there. And we agree. And like, we don't think he should be fired. But we do think there is going to be a big drop off, and it could come in the form of a really long losing streak.
So when I had Under the Shell podcast on to talk Maryland, these are 2 students who run a podcast, who work for the student newspaper, but also do a podcast for fun on the side. And they literally said to me, "We better get to 6 wins quick, or we're not going to get there." So they even know like this.
Yeah.
It's all first part of their schedule. They need to make hay. Versus Wisconsin, you guys have already alluded to that. Then you go to Kinnick to take on the Hawkeyes, and then Purdue, which is always Purdue is such an interesting place to go play. Like interesting fun fact for you guys. Next to the team up north, since the year 2000, Ohio State, the next team in the Big Ten who has beaten Ohio State the most is Purdue.
I remember there was that one in down in West Lafayette, that big one.
So
with Jeff Brom and Rondell Moore.
Back during the Tressel era, it was always, I mean, even when we won the national championship, it was a last-second 4th down Hail Mary, the Holy Buckeye play.
Craig Krenzel. Yeah.
Craig Krenzel run the football. No, he's throwing it. Oh, Jenkins, so it's amazing. But they had us beat that day. Purdue's always got. I have PTSD with Purdue. So
buckle up this year. They've got so they're one of only 2 teams in the entire conference that returns both their quarterback and their OC, and we think they've got a lot of interesting parts. They got a ton of interesting transfers on defense. They've got like 4 guys coming to their team from Georgia, which I mean these aren't like starters from Georgia, but that pedigree says something, right? Yeah. So that like whether they can pull it all together is another question, but that team is a little that team's pretty spicy.
We're not looking forward to that one.
Yeah, here's my take on Purdue. Purdue is going to be the best team with a losing record in the Big Ten.
That's a great take.
Yeah, their schedule's a train wreck.
We were talking about them like ending up right around 5-7. We don't like that we will probably be a really big game for them. We think they're going to be better on both sides of the ball. Scuzz has really presented, like when we previewed them, presented some really compelling cases for why they're going to get better on offense. And they almost can't not get better on defense. They were so bad on defense last year that like they, as we joked, like if they go from 30 points given up to 29 points given up a game, that's an improvement. So they probably could be better on both sides of the ball. And our game is the kind of game they're going to be looking for to try to map out some path to bowl eligibility. So we don't like that spot. The 2 you jumped over, Ohio State and Wisconsin, look, we've danced with
Iowa and Wisconsin.
We've danced with those 2 teams forever. We know them like the back of our hand. We've split the series with Wisconsin since 1985. Like we'll dance with those 2 teams in the mud all day.
Just one note on Iowa. We lost to them by 3 last year, a 52-yard field goal at the death. Iowa's exactly the same this year as they were last year. Mm-hmm. The rumors of their offensive resurgence are much exaggerated.
Yes, agreed.
And
it's completely
at Kinnick, it's probably a loss for us, but it's not that far-fetched.
I am known to Iowa fans. They hate me. Absolutely, because I wrote a scathing article about Kirk Ferentz years ago. By the way, they hate Doug. He hates Doug Maurice too.
That's why we had Doug Maurice on the podcast. It was that week.
I
Yeah.
wrote an article that Kirk Ferentz has held their fan base hostage, and their fan base. There was some people who emailed me death threats, and then there were some people who emailed me like secretly, "You're absolutely right."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Ooh,
There's some Stockholm syndrome in.
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
All right, bye week so you get 2 weeks to prepare for the Buckeyes in Wrigley, and then Michigan. Boy, the Big Ten schedule makers didn't do you a favor with back-to-back ones there. I mean,
we actually looked, right, and it's very, very rarely ever happened that we played you and that other team in back-to-back weeks.
Three times since 1995.
Yeah, 3 times since 1995. And your game, we're pretty realistic. That's the only one on our schedule that we can't really see a path, and we haven't put a heck of a lot of effort into finding a path.
Kind of playing two different sports at this stage.
Yeah. Michigan, on the other hand, we're not like certainly not saying, hey, like we think this is going to happen, but like you can squint and see if X, Y, and Z happen and we get break. And that like certain things happen, the same kind of things that would lead to you guys pasting Michigan this year. Like they don't get linebackers. They don't get an answer at quarterback. Like those things don't develop for them. Like we would love to be a situation where those things are true. And also we're playing them right when they're looking ahead to you guys the following week. So we realistically look, the paths that we're mapping out to a successful season don't include either of those teams. So like, sure. It doesn't really bother us talking about them one way or the other.
But I will say this though, John, about them. There is a scenario where they have 4 close games against Texas, Oregon, USC, Ohio State, right? And those are their 4 big ones. And they win 3 of them, and they go 11-1. That scenario exists.
Yeah.
There's also a scenario where they get loose, they get some injuries up front defensively, and it falls apart and swirls out of control.
Oh yeah, if Michigan lost a couple if they lost defensive tackles, then that's a team all of a sudden that's in trouble. Yeah.
Exactly. And then they're knocking the door of 6-6. Like that is out there. And I tried to explain that in our
that's a very Buckeye take right there. 6-6.
It is, but
it's not wrong. We talked about the same thing, that was like their floor if everything went wrong.
They could be a really good team that wins 8 games because the schedule just does them no favors.
Plus, and this is what, of course, the Buckeyes are going to bring this up, right? Plus, how much did the last 3 years of knowing your opponent's plays really play into your advantage? We're going to find out this year.
John and I spent a non-insignificant amount of time texting each other and arguing about this, so we have very different points of view.
I have been up and down the mountain on this. Most of it did not get onto the pod, but we will say, and we always toot our horn on this, and this is something that predated the college huddle, but last spring, not this past spring, but the spring before that, we were asked to join this national pod poll of all of these different podcasts from all over the country. And we were one of 2 pods in the entire country who had Michigan as winning the national title. Almost everyone else had Georgia. And we were just like, Michigan's, I don't know what more you want. We didn't know that the cheating was happening. We didn't know the video taking was happening.
But really had an advantage.
But we did know that they were absolutely stacked with veterans and depth on both sides of the ball. And that even in the Big Ten, very few teams could have. So like they did exactly what we expected them to do. But and we also we literally just previewed them, and we gave them credit. Like again, we juxtaposed them with Washington. We think that they did what you should do, right? They promoted a guy from in-house to run it, and they brought in a guy who coaches the exact same defense to coach their defense. They did everything they could to make the transition smooth. We just their schedule just isn't. It's a hard schedule.
It's tough. It's difficult. But I'll say this, Eric, pointing you out. Dealing with that fan base is insufferable. It is insufferable.
I got
I
a
know
couple
Buckeye
of,
fans are annoying. I know we're
yeah.
annoying. We're like locusts, okay? And we.
Well, you know, I live in Cincinnati, right? So I'm in Ohio. I've got a number of Michigan colleagues who are all like super chill right now. If Michigan drops a game that they shouldn't, or looks like garbage against Texas, I mean, honestly, that USC game is the one that I think, like, if they lose that, that's the one that'll really set their hair on fire. But you said it earlier. That situation could spiral out of control if things don't go right. And if they're a team that installs a run first QB and really struggles to do anything other than run the ball, they're going to be a really good rushing team in a conference with a lot of really good running defenses, right? So
Right.
I can see the problems that they are going to face. I also think that their talent is such that 8 of those teams on their schedule they barely have to get out of bed for it.
As we said on the pod, though, may they lose 8 games, and may 3 of those 4 may they win 8 games and lose 4, and may 3 of those losses be ones everyone's circling, and may the 4th be Northwestern. That's what I want to see. Let's let that happen.
We would love it. As I have taught my children, as my father has taught me, in my household, it is Ohio State and whoever is playing the team up north that you root for. So that's how we roll. Moving on, let's get back to Northwestern. You end the year against your rival, Illinois. Explain this rivalry to me.
We think we've started to get turned back toward the sun on this one. I mean, really recent history, we've absolutely owned it, but there have been a couple years really down, that really bad stretch for us, which, like, post that 2020 team that you guys got to see in that Big Ten championship game. Then after that, we really kind of went into a cave. And during that stretch was right when Brett Bielema came in. And for the first time in forever, Illinois gained the upper hand in the rivalry. But we took it back this past year. And I think we look at where, again, by the time we get to this game, we're going to know. But Illinois' defense absolutely imploded to a level that even we didn't see coming. They were supposed to be significantly better based on the talent, particularly up front, that they had. And instead, they just absolutely laid an egg on defense. And now they lose that entire defensive line. That was basically their best players. So they're particularly like Johnny Newton. You can look at what they have on offense, and they have more pieces on offense than they do on defense, but we're not talking about a lot. And we like where that one's tilted for us.
You asked about the rivalry itself, Eric. It's not one that, like, pops, but
people say Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois, Northwestern. Really, it's
well. The similarity though is that if one of my favorite books is The 10-Year War about Schembechler and Hayes, and a huge component of what has led to everything centered, like a large part of the root of that rivalry is the cultural differences between Columbus and Ann Arbor.
Yes. To
say downstate Illinois and the city of Chicago have cultural differences is an understatement. And these schools on a daily basis don't, hate each other or anything like that. But football, which has been quite one-sided for us over the last 20 years, and basketball, which has been quite one-sided for them over the last 20 years, like you can see it. You can see how these teams don't like each other. Illinois is quite bothered by us calling ourselves Chicago's Big Ten team. that really gets under their skin.
And it's annoying for us on the flip side too, because like we're Chicago's Big Ten team, and our rival's entire alumni base lives in Chicago.
Yeah. So there's some fun, there's some heat there. It's not nothing that aspires or extends much beyond the bounds of the state of Illinois, but it feels dang good to beat them.
Yeah, not to switch sports, but that's a fun game to watch in basketball. Northwestern Illinois, that is a lot of fun.
It has been the last couple
of years. Yeah, especially these last 2 years have been special ones for us. Yeah, so
really Northwestern Purdue has been a lot of fun to watch.
Yes,
not to poke the Boiler Express guys, but
no. Amen. The whole state of Indiana, man. Boo Buoy plus the state of Indiana was a glorious run for us. We'll never forget that. But we got Illinois once last year too.
All right, now that we've been through the schedule, it's time for you guys, and you've probably already done this on your podcast, and if I have, I'm sorry I missed it, but give me the floor and ceiling for Northwestern this year, and I mean the floor and the ceiling.
Well, I think for me, it's funny because I saw that posted in our questions, and we haven't done this. I don't feel like we're stepping on it because we're going to talk about Northwestern at such great lengths when we preview them, but it's funny you posted that question, and I was like really having to like stare in the mirror. And I guess if we're going absolute floor, absolute ceiling, it's such a map. 2-10 is the floor, 11-1 is the ceiling.
Wow.
I mean,
you think 2-10? I'd say 4-8 is a floor.
No, but I'm saying if we're really playing this game, I can show you how we're going to lose 10, and I can show you how we're going to win 11. That's if we're going really extreme. I think if I was really looking at floor,
John, you win the award. Since you're the last podcast that I've done, you're number 17. Ohio State's next, but you're number 17. You win the award for the biggest floor ceiling gap. Congratulations.
I mean, it truly is. If we have quarterbacks that can't throw, I'm saying everyone's nightmare out loud. But on the other hand, we brought in a transfer quarterback who was the fastest quarterback in the SEC, which is something no one debated. In a quarterback with Jaden Daniels, they were like, yeah, Mike Wright's the fastest quarterback in the SEC, and he's got a good arm. And we're pairing him with this wonderkind offensive coordinator. So I can map you out the absolute worst case scenario and the absolute best case. Now, more realistically, like Scuzz said, I feel like for us, 3-9 or 4-8 is probably a floor for us. And we're looking for 6 or 7. That's what we want. And we can easily map you out a path to that. A bowl is what we want, and we can map you that path in a bunch of different ways.
We think there's 9 reasonably winnable games. We're not going to win. We're not going to win all those, but so I would go 4 I would go 4 is the floor, 9 is the ceiling, or maybe 3 is the floor, 9 is the ceiling. But we think, success for this team is getting to a bowl game. I alluded to it before. We haven't had 2 good seasons consecutively since 2017 and 2018. It's a long time.
It's crazy. All you Buckeye fans watching this pod, you saw us in 2018. You saw us in 2020. We put the fear of God into you in both of those games.
Mm-hmm.
In the season between those 2 seasons, we were an absolute train wreck.
Right, I know.
And since 2018, we've won the Big Ten twice, come within a 52-yard field goal. I mean, we've won the Big Ten West twice, come within a 52-yard field goal of winning it a third time, and yet not strung 2 good seasons together in that 17-18 was the last time we did it. So we're just looking for another bowl. We would like the whiplash in this fan base in this program. Like, give us 2 good ones in a row.
Sure. Looking for teacups instead of the roller coaster right now.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. It was so funny because after 18 happened for you guys, I predicted Northwestern would win the West in 19 and fell flat on my. And then I was like, well, that ain't going to happen. They're going to win 2 games in 2020. And here we played each other.
Right there with you. We rode that roller coaster the exact same way. It's crazy.
Yeah, so we kept saying Patty Fitch, his team's every other year, and it's the year you think not. So that was kind of what we were saying. But we'll see. We'll see if that continues for you guys, or if you can get those teacups like you mentioned, Eric.
Eric, you just made me feel a lot better because we got a fair amount of heat in that 2019 season for being unrealistic optimists and just bleeding too much purple, wearing too much tinted glasses. It makes me feel really good to hear there was somebody else that had the exact same read that we did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I had a Patty Fitz love affair, so that was kind of that was my Patty Fitz era, and then it all fell apart on me.
We
so,
think
anyway,
the one thing we wanted to say from a Buckeye perspective, just because we're on your pod and just to bring it up because we talked about it, is we've given the Buckeye defense, particularly the Buckeye secondary, no fair share of grief over the past decade of this pod. You guys got a real one in Jim Knowles, man. That guy is the real deal. And I think we looked and we mapped out something like 9 consecutive years that guy's made his team's defense better than it was the year before. And we look at a guy like Denzel Burke. I feel like that's a guy who gets wasted on Buckeye teams of the past. And you got a bunch of guys back there who just cover well, don't make mistakes. And you have an awesome defensive line. And I don't know, like, I'm just like, you guys, you might have the best defense in the country. It's going to be in the conversation, but just hang on to that guy as much as for as long as you can, tooth and nail, because that guy he's the real deal, man.
Yeah, he gets paid handsomely to be a coordinator at Ohio State.
I bet.
$2.2 million, I think.
Yeah. Which again, here's where we rewind though. The DC at Indiana is making half that. DC at Indiana should be making 1/10 of that. It's kind of amazing.
It is
like Jim Knowles probably called his agent the second he saw that.
So he's such an interesting guy too. He's not married.
Yeah.
He literally bought a cheap apartment near campus to just store his coaching stuff in. His sister, I know one another through X. He gives like his sister a lot of stuff, like here's another this trophy and this and that, and he's a mad scientist. They say he literally lives in his office, just eat, sleep, live defensive football. That's who he is.
We watched
when they interview him, he's like so bored by like the questions because you could tell in his mind he's like, I'd rather be in my office scheming how I'm going to stop Northwestern on 3 and 2.
Yeah,
like, it's like
he's
crazy.
like, I mean, and again, because like you said, our history with Duke goes back so far. Like we remember what he did at Duke with their secondary in that 4-2-5 scheme way back in the day. And then he went to Oklahoma State and spent like 5 years doing nothing but elevating that defense. Then he got to Ohio State and he's done the exact same thing. I'm just like, that's the kind of guy where if you put him on a team that is stacked with 5-star guys, he's going to get you everything out of it. And I mean, again, I'm like, that to me is that's your giant saving grace this season. I don't think the schedule does you any favors, but you guys have an ungodly good defense to lean on.
Yeah, so the going theory here for us is that we're going to win this thing defensively and with a good running game attack. And getting Chip Kelly in with his running scheme is going to be important for us because not only do we have Travion Henderson, but we got Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss as well to throw in that backfield. And really, we just needed a quarterback who couldn't mess that up. Send out Kyle McCord to Syracuse, have fun, kid, insert Will Howard, and who's much bigger and much more athletic, and won't just focus on Marvin Harrison. Although, how could you really blame a guy when you have Marvin Harrison that you're like focusing on him on every play? But I digress. Even the offense is going to be better. We returned most of the offensive line, which was big for us. Yeah, this season's it's natty or bust, and that's not me saying that. That's the players saying that.
Oh, that's very apparent.
This is what we talked about when we previewed Ohio State. Is we think you guys have an awesome team, but it's a hard schedule, and your expectation is that you're going to win every single game.
It's not a hard schedule. There's one game. There's one hard game.
Can I guess what you think it is?
I think it's Oregon, and I think they have the better quarterback, and I don't know that you guys have the firepower. That's my thesis, but it's going to be interesting.
And again, like we have you, like, our consensus on the pod was 11-1, and you guys we think you guys could play Oregon twice this year easily. And
you're a lock for the playoff. Like, I mean,
like we 100% believe, and that's the thing. I mean, it's just, we know how good of a team you have, but we know that the expectation within your fan base is all of them. And it's got to be wild. It's got to be a wild world to live in. Bring us back to where we started. We can't look through our lens and see what every Buckeye fan must be experiencing. We're like, we're looking for 6 or 7 would be amazing. And we know you guys are like 12, and if it's 11, one of them better be Michigan. We know that's how you're wired.
So my prediction, and this, I've already put this out there in the ether, so everybody knows it. I think Ohio State goes into Eugene and loses, and then we play Oregon and Indy and beat them.
I think it is highly plausible.
And then we see them again in the college football playoff for the rubber match.
It would be.
That'd be crazy.
It's amazing how plausible that is.
Yes, that's extremely plausible.
And the Ducks versus Bucks rivalry is born, and we are calling it the Nike Bowl. And my idea was this, that moving forward, Phil Knight he's like, hey, I declare, because Ohio State's Nike's biggest merchandise in college seller in college, and of course he loves Oregon, and he basically paid for the university. The Nike Bowl would become the new rivalry in the Big Ten, where the losing coach would have to take off his kicks, walk them to the 50-yard line, and hand them to the winning coach, and walk off the field in his socks. And that's the Nike Bowl, and that's the trophy that you get to keep.
That's a pretty good idea. Dip those things in silver, and
I will say, based on our limited experience so far with the Oregon fan base since they joined the conference, I think the Oregon fan base will take you up on that rivalry.
Yeah.
Like, they're bringing.
They're trying to call themselves the team out west, trying to do the whole team up north.
Okay,
thing
so real talk. Much love for Oregon. My aunt has lived in Oregon for 4 decades. I've been there many times. It's a great place. I like the Ducks. I like Oregon University. I was at the last time Oregon and Ohio State played for a national championship, because I lived in Dallas at the time. But more importantly, I was there at the beginning of the next season when Oregon played LSU at whatever the kickoff game was at Cowboy Stadium. And to say those fans were not prepared for what met them at Cowboy Stadium in the shape of LSU fans is a extreme understatement. Again, much love for that for anybody with Oregon. Love the Duck, love what they bring to the table. But they got to work on their travel game.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
So we'll see. But at least certain parts of the Twitter sphere, of the X sphere within Oregon fandom, they're certainly bringing something to the conference. I guess I'll put it that way.
If they do come to Indy, that fan split is going to be a fascinating thing to look at.
It's literally our second home.
Yeah.
It's only a 3-hour drive from Columbus, and that's
we always joke about how Indiana, the University of Indiana, the day they take pictures of their stadium is the day that they play Ohio State every year.
That is a true statement.
Or every other year, yeah.
Yeah.
It literally is a true statement. I've interviewed people that they've told me that's actually true. That's what they do.
If I were them, I would do the same thing. It's pretty smart.
Guys, this has been a ton of fun. This went way over what I thought. Usually we keep these to 30 to 45 minutes.
Can I drop one last tiny thing on you, Eric?
Go for it, Eric.
For your fans, so I get it. Football games and baseball stadiums, it's a little played out. Wrigley is a strange place to play football because it's relatively tight. It's a lot better than it used to be, but sight lines aren't great. it is still a very historic place. If you grew up watching the Cubs on WGN, if you grew up, hearing all the stories about Wrigley, it's a pretty cool spot to go. So I'm sure none of the Ohio State faithful need any encouragement to do this. They're going to sell that place out, but for what it's worth.
I just want to say, Scuzz couldn't be more wrong. Wrigley sucks. You shouldn't go. All you Buckeye fans, stay home. Don't
Trust
go.
Me.
It'll be a horrible experience for you. Don't go to the stadium.
If we could just get Harry Carey to call the game, that would be fantastic. I would sign up for that immediately. Let's get somebody who could do Harry Carey's voice, and
we'll get Will Ferrell doing Harry Carey in there.
Yeah.
I mean,
talk about the game at all.
We're not getting our hopes up. We know Buckeye fans are absolutely going to descend on Wrigley.
They will be there.
We're prepared. We have realistic expectations.
And you bring up WGN. Not only do I remember WGN, I remember Bozo the Clown on WGN.
Oh, there you go.
So you can age me right there. There you go. That I know that. All right, guys. Tell everybody, if there's a Northwestern fan who stumbles upon this on our YouTube channel and they've not heard of the West Lot Pirates. Well, first off, how in the world are you a Northwestern fan and you've not heard of the West Lot Pirates? Tell them where they can find you.
Anywhere you go. At West Lot Pirates, one word. Search for West Lot Pirates on any podcast app or website, etc. WestlotPirates.com is pretty straightforward. Luckily we haven't had a lot of competition for that moniker. So, but we're on Instagram, Threads, X is our primary spot, Facebook, Apple Pods, Spotify, Google Pods, everything. Pretty much anywhere you can go for the podcast content. Just search. Even you just search West Lot, you're gonna find us pretty quick. Look for the red pirate flag.
And there you go. And if you happen to go to the game and you're looking for them, they'll be flying a red flag, man. Going up and say, "Hey, saw you guys on the OHIO podcast." They'll be good dudes to you, I promise. So it'll be a lot of fun. All right, guys, thank you so much for coming on. We will do this again later in the season. We will preview that game. I'll be looking forward to that. Until then, guys, thank you so much.
Cheers, Eric. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And thank you to the West Lot Pirates for joining us here on the OHIO podcast. Appreciate you guys joining us. If you are a Northwestern fan, go check them out. You probably already know who they are and following them. They're that good. But if for some reason magically you haven't, you need to go do that. All right, Chris, let's talk about the Wildcats roster, because there are going to be a couple names you recognize. But for the most part, these are going to be names you have not heard before. And maybe you will by the end of the year. We shall see. But let's check it out. Let's start with the offense first as we pull open our lads and go straight to the offense first. Let's start at quarterback. Transfer Mike Wright. They lose their quarterbacks. That is going to be the biggest issue for them is quarterback play. Now, Cam Porter, the running back, is back. They do have they feel very good about their running back room. Look at wide receiver. Look at the Z position. This is a name everybody should know. A.J. Henning is back. Decided to stick around again. So that's obviously a win for them. They feel like they have more speed than they've ever had before. And they've got a decent offensive line. Now, they are bringing in 2 transfers here, which typically doesn't bode well for an offensive line, but we shall see how that works out for them. Offensively, I'm going to say it put it to you like this, Chris. Once again, this is a lunch pail, hardworking. I won't call them no name because I don't think they're a no name offense, but this is not your typical 4-star recruiting offense. But this is a more athletic offense than they've had in the past, which signals, I think, a little bit of a change of philosophy in year number 2 that they're getting to in the Brom era.
Yeah. And like you said, this is an offense that, we've talked about it several times. A lot of these Big Ten offenses this season are not what you'd call power offenses. They're not really explosive, not overpowering. They're not going to push you around like Michigan as much. They're not going to go out there and run up and down the field on you like Ohio State or Oregon. But this is an offense that could quietly be good. One thing that I really thought that David Braun did last year very well was he had his team fundamentally sound. They didn't make a lot of mistakes.
Right.
That's going to be the key. If this offense can go out and not make a lot of mistakes, score when they get the opportunity, don't turn the ball over, play field position and win the field position battle, flip the field when you need to. This is a team that I think can win some games. Again, I don't think this is going to be another 8-5, 8-4, 8-5 type season, but it's a team that can win some games and might sneak up on some people. Like you said, Cam Porter, I really like Cam Porter. I think he's great coming back. The quarterback position, I think, Ryan Helinski's been there for about 14 years now. But, I don't know too much about as far as what Mike Wright's going to be able to do. So I'm a little concerned about the quarterback play, but I think I think as far as the line goes and the running backs will be okay.
I would be too if I'm a Northwestern fan. But they're used to having a guy just don't lose us the game, right?
Yes.
Manage the game. And it worked for him last year, and it can work for him again. So we shall see. It's again, I'm not coming on here and saying there's no chance, right? I'm just saying that should be a major concern. And if they don't get good quarterback play, if they get bad quarterback play, right?
Yes.
That's a concern. All right, let's take a look at the defense. So over on the defensive side of the ball, Richie Haggerty, Najee Story, and Carmine Bastone on the defensive front, along with Jalen Pate. Linebackers, Xander Mueller. All right, there's your heart and soul guy. That's a guy. He's been there forever. He's another one of those 17-year guys, Chris. He's the heart and soul of this defense, man, right there. And then look at the defensive backfield. You got a junior in Devin Turner, a graduate senior in Coco Azima. Great name. You got a redshirt junior in Adai, I guess. And Robert Fitzgerald is a redshirt sophomore. Again, Xander Mueller, dude, is the real deal and someone that
tackling machine.
Yeah. If I recall, he was one of your big dogs in the preseason rankings.
Yeah, he was one of my top 3 linebackers, I think, that I had.
Yeah, and that's rightfully so. I mean, should have been first teamer for us. Was not. Some JR and I had some different guys that we should have maybe had a little less and had him higher up, but I think Xander Mueller ended up being second string for second team All Big Ten for us. Might end up first team by the end of the season. We shall see.
Don't sleep on Mac Uline either. Okay. The weak side linebacker's got some talent. I think he's going to do okay.
So what I'm hearing you say is this is a solid, fundamentally sound defense once again.
I think so. I think this is going to be a team that, again, doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And if you don't make a lot of mistakes, you're going to stay in ball games with those teams that are at or below your talent level.
All right. Let's take a look at the schedule now and give our predictions of where we think Northwestern is going to be. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, Chris. Northwestern was one of the more difficult teams for me to try to predict. I have them winning all 3 non-conference games. Mm-hmm. In fact, all 3 of us do. Miami, Duke, Eastern Illinois, all 3 of us say they go 3-0 to start the season. That 4th game, September 21st, I think is going to tell us a lot about not only Northwestern, but also Washington. Keep your eye on that game. That is a huge football game for both these teams. Then they get their bye. Then they take on Indiana. I think that's a win. Then the rest of their schedule is going to I struggled to find a win outside of maybe at Maryland, but it's at Maryland, Wisconsin, at Iowa, at Purdue, but again, it's at Purdue. They again finished the season at home against Ohio State and Michigan in back-to-back weeks, and then rival Illinois at Wrigley Field.
That's just mean.
It
That last 3
is.
weeks, that's just mean.
And maybe Illinois, if I'm a Northwestern fan and I'm 5-6 going into that last game against Illinois,
Oh, you need to find a way to win that.
you got to win that game. Get to 6-6, go to a bowl game back-to-back years. If they do that, I think the fan base is going to be happy with this season.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be easy? No, because I think you need to find 2 other wins outside of Miami, Duke, and Eastern. I think you find one against Indiana, maybe Maryland, maybe Purdue, but again, both of those are on the road. That's what makes this so difficult. And if you drop one at let's say against Duke in week 2,
Now you got to get out
now
there.
you have an uphill battle to get to 6. Vegas says 4.5. All 3 of us we are all identical, and we are all identical on all 4 of their wins and all 8 of their losses. We all believe they win against Miami, Duke, Eastern, and Indiana.
Wait a minute. JR didn't choose Indiana to win?
Isn't that crazy? It's a shocker. Absolute shocker. Here's the thing. If you're a Northwestern fan and you're mad at us right now, don't be. I think you have a really good coach, but
Yes.
I don't know how good just yet.
And give
He
him time
shocked
to
me
get-
last
yeah.
year. Can he shock me again? Again, if Northwestern gets 6 wins, Chris, chalk that up as a great second season for Brom, and congratulations, man.
And this is a guy who's not dealing with the most talent in the world, Eric. I mean, yes, he's got some talented players, but he doesn't have a roster like, Ohio State or Michigan or
Right.
Penn State or Oregon. He doesn't even have a roster as good as Wisconsin right now.
No, or Iowa or Minnesota.
Yeah, Nebraska. I mean, right now he is really up against the wall. So if he comes out and does it again and takes his team to 6-6, takes him to a second consecutive bowl game, you need to ink this guy to a long-term deal because this guy is your future. I think if they give him time and he gets the opportunity to recruit some talent in there, get a foothold in that Chicago area and get some of that Chicago talent coming that way, he's going to do just fine.
Northwestern's a special place because it takes a certain kind of athlete, right?
A certain kind of student as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You're looking for an athlete whose main concern is not getting to the NFL, but getting that Northwestern diploma.
Yeah, you're not competing out there with Illinois or Iowa for your recruits. You're competing with
Vanderbilt,
Stanford, Notre Dame.
Duke, Notre Dame, Michigan.
Please.
Yeah. Hey, academic standards are, still a thing.
Standards don't exist in any form up there.
Touche. Just the fact, given what happened last year to this team,
Yeah,
and what they did, if they get to 6-6 again, not saying I'm eating crow, but I will say this, at that point, you have to stop doubting Northwestern and be like, this is a winning team every year now.
I'm telling you, Eric. I look at this team. I look at David Braun, and it surprises me to say this. When I look around the Big Ten in a lot of places, Nebraska, Purdue, Northwestern, if they're not playing Ohio State, these are teams I want to root for.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, especially Nebraska, but these other two as well, their program's going in the right direction, and I want to see them do well.
Yeah.
So,
I've always had a special place in my heart for Northwestern. They were kind of like my my adopted second team in the Big Ten for a lot of years, and then they got really good twice, and we played them in the Big Ten. I was like, well, I can't root for you anymore, guys. But then all of a sudden, now I find myself kind of rooting for them again. Like when they go out to Seattle, Washington, it still feels like a kind of like us versus them, doesn't it? Like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
almost want the Wildcats to go out there and beat them, just
Yeah,
so you can kind of say, see, the Big Ten was better than the Pac-12. We just beat your Pac-12 champion from a year ago.
yeah. I want the Pac-12 teams to get just slapped all over the place by every team that's not wearing, maize and blue.
Right? They can beat them, right?
They can beat the snot out of those guys all they want.
I think that outside of Oregon, the other three are going to find that the Big Ten his move was difficult, and it could all start in that fourth game in Seattle, Washington, if Northwestern goes in there and beats them. That is going to be incredibly interesting. Like, share, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. If you're a Northwestern fan, let us know what you think about our preview in the comment section below. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Is there anything that you liked or didn't like about this that you would like to express your opinion on? By all means, we'd be happy to address that in the comments section below. If you aren't already, by all means, go out to the westlawnpirates.com. Go follow those guys. I'm sure you are. Most Northwestern fans are. If you're an Ohio State fan, it's still worth going and checking out. These guys do really cool work for Northwestern. They've been doing it for years, and they deserve all the attention they get and more. And so go check them out. And if you're a Buckeye fan and you just stumbled on this, go back and watch all the other previews we've done. We have done 16 other previews. Northwestern was number 17, which means, Chris, up next is the Scarlet and Gray. We finally finish with Ohio State, and it's game week.
It's been a long summer, Eric. The Big Ten did not do this podcast any favors by expanding.
The season previews.
I
I remember the
remember,
days when I remember them days when we had 10.
yeah, absolutely.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
Yeah, that's just it's wild, but I'll tell you, it's been a good time. I'm excited to see what happens with all these teams, specifically, obviously, Ohio State, who we're going to talk about next.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Again, please like, share, subscribe. Really does help the channel. Please leave a comment down in the comment section below. We'll respond best we can. Till next time, Chris. OH.
IO.
Go Bucks.